Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Hitchcock, and I feel inspired to tell a story. The title of the story will be How Coyote Stole the Moon. Maybe it should be again, because there's been other stories of how Coyote stole the moon, and I'm not totally familiar with them at this point. So any relationship between those stories and this one, or any characters, fact or fictional, are purely coincidental and designed to be such. So sit back and enjoy. Before we get started with the story per se, I would like to say that this was inspired by, I believe, a parent speaking at a school board about the masking or the mandates of some things, that she felt like she was in a dystopian science fiction novel, and that what she was perceiving was similar to that more so than real life. So with that in mind, we are thinking about a story here that at first I thought the title might be Atlantis 2.0. Since we're having rising sea levels and seemingly being destroyed by our own addictions to technologies and the inability to see the long-term consequences of many of those tendencies. Another story that might feature into this would be Pandora's Box, but it didn't really cover enough territory, or the Tower of Babel, and there are potentially other legends. But in this case, I'm picking a Native American traditional character in the Coyote, in the sense that he's the trickster, and he's always trying to get the advantage, and it always seems to backfire on him. Much like the Roadrunner and the Coyote. And as such, Coyote could actually be an alien talking to another alien, and not really a coyote at all, but some kind of being that has some mystical powers to influence the course of events of humanity. So, with that said, let us begin the story. So in the tradition of the Dene and the Hopi people, the humanity is not really, this isn't humanity 1.0, it's humanity, I think, 4.0, potentially going to humanity 5.0, and they have various creation events that are somewhat similar to the flood of Noah or the Ice Age, driving people to very small groups and then repopulating the planet. But it seemed like no matter what, the human children somehow, like coyotes, outsmarted themselves and let their technology or their greed or their selfishness get the better of them to make a big mess of the planet, at which point the entities, whom we don't know who they are really because they're so much more vast than we are, said, we got to clean this place up. And so they sent down various forms of purification to the planet to resolve this issue. So we are now at the precipice of once again looking at a massive extinction and of global proportions, affectionately known as the Anthropocene. So let us proceed with where things are going with the Anthropocene era. So our story begins with Coyote being summoned to a all-powerful deity who had a lot more say about things on Earth than Coyote did, but he was sort of the archetypal alternate to Mother Earth. So it might have been the sun, or it might have been who knows what. Anyway, he was called Coyote, and now this was some time ago, and said, Coyote, Mother Earth and I have got a big problem with our human children again. They're really running amok and making a foul mess out of our beautiful planet, and our experiment has gone horribly astray since once again they've become infatuated with their technology and completely forgotten the people that put them there and all the care and trouble we've gone to give them a beautiful place. We Mother Earth came to me and said, we can't burn them out. That didn't work, and flooding them out didn't work. They don't seem to ever change their way of behaving. And we had thought this experiment would have gone better, more like a, what should we say, bonobian society versus the chimpanzee alpha-dominated male type of societies that seem to predominate most of the cultures of the planet today, such that we're just seeing everything getting messed up. But we don't know what to do, so we thought, well, Coyote, can you figure out a way to get these people to behave better without completely exterminating them? Because I don't really want to send a ball of hot gas from the sun, because it'll kill everything else too. And Mother Earth is really fond of some of her other creatures, and this is all being driven by her desire to keep them healthy and safe from these, what has turned into a horrible predator, somewhat unwitting but horribly disruptive predator. So, Coyote, we want you to think about what to do to deal with this problem. Well, of course, Coyote was not thrilled at all of the possibility of having to be charged with such a huge task when, after all, these more monumental entities than he himself had utterly failed in restraining their ill-founded experiment in humanity. So he protested. He said, but I'm just a coyote and nobody believes me. The elders don't believe me. The honest people don't believe me. The only people that believe me are cons and cheats because, well, cons and cheats believe anything just like I do. So how on earth am I ever going to resolve this kind of problem when you guys don't? Well, of course, the Lord said, well, I'm sorry, Coyote, you don't want to do it. You don't think you can. But if you don't do it, well, we've got a horrible fate for you that I think some of the other Native American stories would cover a lot better than I would. So I think you ought to feel really motivated to do this, because we're going to essentially set your tail on fire and it'll just keep burning until you've done what you've done. Well, Coyote said, well, okay, but let me think about it a while, because I got to come up with a scheme here that's going to work and accomplish what you want me to do, and I just don't see how on earth I'm going to do that. Well, creation said, you know what you've got going for you, Coyote, is you can appear in people's dreams, right? And Coyote agreed. He says, yes, I can inspire them in their dreams by leading them places and showing them things they might never have seen had they not had the dream. So creation told Coyote, he said, well, work that angle. He said, I want you to, these people are obsessed with their technologies. They're obsessed with comfort. They're obsessed with security. Take all these obsessions and roll them into a ball that they will all swallow, such that those that seem to be the greediest and the least aware, the least likely to do ceremony, the least likely to remember nature and their existence and their prayers, and get them out of the picture without taking out the rest of creation. We don't want to hurt the animals. We don't want to hurt the plants. We don't really want to hurt the people. We just want to kind of get their attention and tell them, hey, stop messing stuff up so bad. Well, Coyote wasn't happy about this at all on one level, but on another level, he was thrilled because he'd been given carte blanche to mess with humanity and fool an entire planet, if possible, full of people into doing something against their own better interests. And so he set out thinking how he was going to accomplish this crazy task. Well, as you might imagine, Coyote was pretty darn concerned of how to resolve this with his tail being on fire, and he knew once it got up to his shank, he'd really be in a world of hurt. And well, he decided to review all of human history, much the way that was done by Mila Jovovich in The Fifth Element, reviewing all of these, or potentially like in Galaxy Quest, the historical records of humanity. At any rate, reviewing these records, he came up with several strategies and thoughts. He was really delighted at the concept and the study of psychopathy and the fact that it seemed like so many psychopaths were at the helm of so many things in humanity. So he racked his brain and looked at things like how Bernie Madoff worked and stories such as, he got really excited about the Turkish delight in the war, which hope, and the possibility of concocting some kind of Turkish delight that he could feed to humanity, or at least the leadership initially, to get them all on board with his nefarious plan. So he set out to mull how he could take the greediest and most insidious minds on the planet and align them all in a huge plan in order to massively reduce the consumption of resources on the planet. And some of you might think we're confusing Coyote with Satan here, but Coyote himself was very offended at that and would take issue with the fact that he's simply acting at the directive of powers much higher than he is, and that he is under certain strictures, that he's not allowed to blow anything up or give people dreams of how to create destructive devices so much as give them dreams of how to create schemes and technologies to affect his plan. So therefore he thinks he's undoing the bad guys and not in order to leave the good guys, whereas Satan wouldn't care. But that being said, he was using some of the same techniques that Satan was allowed, according to historical records, of lying and inspiring people to do things that were harmful to others or selfish or just generally what one would consider bad behavior. So he could, in fact, do this. He also, like Satan, couldn't force anybody to do anything, and everything had to be done by some kind of agreement, or at least reluctant acquiescence, where they've been backed into a corner, such as by a mandate of some kind, for example. So Coyote was scratching his head right and left and reading these books and watching videos and learning all about humanity and ways to execute a plan. So at that point, he worked it out. Well, Coyote got his plan kind of concocted, and he went back to creation humbly and said, I think I've got a way to do this. Creation responded, well, yes, how? And Coyote said, well, I'm going to make a pie. Well, after the laughter subsided, of course, Coyote was relying a little on humor here to lighten things up. He said, not really a pie so much, but I read about this Turkish delight and how if I gave these human children addictive substances, they would subsequently want more of it and compromise their integrity very much in order to get these desirable substances, much as in the past they've been addicted to things like heroin and cocaine. Well, we're looking at finding the other thing they're addicted to, of course, is power and greed. So I've decided what I'm going to do is come to various entities in a dream, in the sense that think of my pie more of like a railroad train driving along. I'm the only one that really knows where the train is going or what's coming down the tracks, and each car is filled with a different group of passengers, and each passenger car has a different set of understandings about what is in the train. And the train, of course, might be the whole plan, or it might be the certain substances that would ultimately be resultant from the plan. But the idea is that each car will, like a gambling car or a prostitution car, will give each group of people in that car whatever is beyond their wildest dreams, be it infinite wealth, infinite power, infinite control, over various entities, and thus they will commit massive amounts of resources in order to affect the plan that I secretly am directing. So, there you have it. Well, once again, after the laughter subsided at Coyote's tall tale of how he was going to potentially rid the planet of a large segment of humanity within the structure of what he'd been told to do. But as things progressed, and as he explained his plan to all creation in good time, it became clear that it wasn't quite as far-fetched as it sounded, and even though he said it initially that it was a pie, the idea was everyone would want to eat the pie, yet no one would really know exactly what was in it, each contributing their own nefarious concoction, thinking they were the only one that were poisoning the pie, and yet at the same time, the pie became its own creation according to Coyote's plan. So, as with his, as we say, kind of counterpart Satan, Coyote went to the various power brokers of the planet in order to execute his plan, because obviously they had the resources and the will to do this. So, at various times he would go to, say, a world leader and say, "Wouldn't you like to dominate the planet?" He gave them the dream of how to concoct a solution involving a disease that would cause all the rest of the planet to take a medicine that might not be good for them. So, for that, Winnie the Pooh awakened with the plan of how to take over the world. At the same time, Coyote went to the executives of drug companies, high-level people that are involved with these things, and gave them the dream of infinite power and infinite wealth through a kind of a new type of medicine that they were going to be able to create and sell and essentially foist on the public, because there would be no way to stop them from doing it, because, well, they had all the levers of power and they had the money to coerce many other entities to follow their lead. At the same time, in another car, we had all the, let's see, who we got now? Military people. Well, you know, this really is Operation Warp Speed, and so Coyote thought to himself, well, who's the most destructive on the planet? Well, it's these big militaries that have all converted all these planetary resources into weapons, or deposited things like uranium, depleted uranium, horrible things that they've created. We need to really, we need to have something happen with them. So he said, well, what would the military like to do? Well, they want control. They want to be able to spy, and they theoretically would like to put a little miniature read-write device in all the people, such that they could effectively control their emotions or their health or wealth, or, as somebody said, download different vaccines right into their homes and bodies. So the military got really excited about the possibility of having these kind of keys to all people's bodies. So in their car, they're all excited about having these kinds of technologies. So we've got several cars, and we got cars farther back where it's simply people that have no idea what's going on, and they well, let's go to the media car next. Yes, there's the media car. Of course, the media is pretty much the handmaiden of the deep state at this point in terms of informational flow. So Coyote said, well, yeah, how am I going to get those people on board? Well, of course, the other people that are in charge had the money and just started throwing it at the media and saying, here's the message, don't let anybody say anything but this message. So Coyote managed to completely distort the fields of things like Facebook and Google, such that certain types of information are virtually banned. And this was also the case in the other country that we mentioned before. So anyway, with these plans in mind, Coyote said to himself, well, I'll just set it in motion and sit back and see what happens. Now, the end of the story would be that, as we said at the beginning, it was somewhat based on the Native American story, and one of the predictions that I remember Thomas Bianca stating was that the elders told him that the final bomb, the final purification would come for breakfast, and the lights in the coach would go dark. Well, there is one thing that needs to be addressed here, and that is the title of the story, which was Coyote Steals the Moon. And once again, that was inspired by an astute comment, I can't recall the woman's name, describing the effects of the vaccine on women's reproductive and moon cycles, and how it's very disruptive of that, such that perhaps one of the ingredients in the pie has an effect on women's moons. All my relations.